Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm Rachel O'Leary, and I need to get packed up for the Catfish Convention this weekend. I'm doing a demo, which is actually the first time I've ever done anything like this for an event. Normally I'm a guest lecturer, or just an attendee. But this weekend I'm doing a build of a Hillstream aquarium, which is pretty exciting. I hope it turns out. They're supplying the materials, so it can always be a bit of a crapshoot as to what I'll have to work with. But I figure if I can do it for you guys, I can do it for a live event. So we'll be doing that. But I figured I'd talk to you guys today while I went through some of my equipment and packed up some bags about a topic that I think is really important. And that's that fish can't live forever. We have to be realistic. Fish get old, fish get sick, you know, and there's only so much we can do as fish keepers. I mean, you can't stop nature. You can't stop the fact that fish are going to age out. And I bring this up because I'm pretty worried about Captain Cranky Pants. He's 12 years old, and he's just not acting like himself lately. I have no desire to film it. I don't want to do an emotional video about it, but I'm a little bit worried about him. The lifespan of fish is not something that you can really find out easily. I mean, there's websites that give you, age ranges, and the average you see for an Oscar is anywhere from 8 years to 12 years, and then you see on other sites 10 years to 20 years, and there's a lot of variables that go into, like, how long a fish will live. What species is it? For instance, catfish are pretty long-lived, even smaller ones, bristlenose. It's not uncommon to have them be breeding and active for 15 or more years. Cories live 10 years or longer. Some of the bigger catfish even longer. Larger cichlids have a longer lifespan than small cichlids. Nanofish are not known to be particularly long-lived. The generic lifespan that they're often given is 3 to 5 years, some smaller. There's a lot of killifish that only live for a year or even months. One of the inevitabilities of fish keeping is that no matter who you are, no matter how well you take care of your fish, you're going to lose some. And when you get into big fish and predatory fish and monster fish, you have the added sort of difficulties of their inherent nature. Big fish fight, big fish move quickly, big fish dart, and we're keeping them in glass boxes. And I know a lot of people will say, well, if you keep them in a big enough tank, you shouldn't have those issues, but it's just not true. Again, we cannot change biology or the nature of fish. Every once in a while, my big gar gets a bee in his bonnet and terrorizes everything else in the tank. Now, he's been with those fish for 12 years or 15 years, and it's happened 2 or 3 times. There's no way to predict it. There's no way to know when it's going to happen. There's no way to prevent it from happening other than trying to set things up as good as we can, maintaining the best water quality we can, feeding them appropriately, and being as responsible and ethical as we can be as fish keepers. I see all the time on YouTube, on Facebook groups, back in forum days, where people get really, really cruel about other people's fish keeping, and I really don't think it does a whole lot to help our hobby. The hardest thing for me about YouTube is that, all of you get to judge me, and it's rough, and I take really good care of my fish. A lot of my fish are really old. You guys know I have neons that moved here with us from our last house, which my kids are now 15 and 14, and we moved here when they were 2 and 3, so they're 13 plus year old neon tetras, which should only live 3 to 5 years. So those guidelines that were given for lifespan aren't particularly accurate. Now, I was hoping Captain Cranky Pants was going to be a 20-year Oscar, but I'm just not positive that that's going to be the case. He's looking weird. There are other fish that are really long-lived. Things like goldfish or koi can live 20 to 30 years. Now how often do they actually get to that lifespan with the way that they're kept? Not that often. And I do think Oscars are one of those fish that are often poorly kept as well. Captain lived in a 120 gallon for over half his life before he got moved into his 75. And he's been with that big catfish whiskey, the 4-line Pim, for several years now. They haven't had any extenuating circumstances to cause any issues. Whiskey looks great, but Captain's not looking awesome. Some of the things that you can see when fish are getting old is you may notice a change in their behavior. They may swim less, they may hang out up at the surface of the water more, not gasping, but just being more sedentary. It'd be like in a dog or a cat, them seeming more lethargic or sleepy. You may notice changes to their body condition. And a lot of the smaller fish, when they're getting just plain old, you'll notice that their spine will drop down a bit. They'll get up almost like a humpback appearance. You may notice that they don't eat quite as vigorously as they used to. You may notice if they're schooling fish, changes in how they school. For instance, if you have a large group of old schooling fish, as they start to age out, the fish will start isolating themselves. And the tricky part with fish aging out is it's difficult to know if they're aging out or if they're getting sick. So we have to look at things like husbandry, diet, water temperature, and all that kind of stuff to try and figure out, and risk or exposure to potential disease, to try and figure out if we're dealing with a fish whose immunity has been suppressed and has maybe become more susceptible to illness, or if they're just getting old. Now in the case of Captain Cranky Pants, he's been with the same fish for years. They have their own equipment. He's been eating the same basic varied diet for years. Same water change schedule. Everything is exactly the same for that aquarium, with no cross-contamination or risk of cross-contamination for years. So I just have to think that he's getting old. And unlike with cats or dogs or even reptiles, it's a lot more difficult to get a fish seen by the vet. There are veterinarians that will deal with fish, but getting a fish to the vet can be quite a thing, and finding a vet that's close enough. I have contacted a vet about Captain just to get some advice, to see if there's anything else I could be doing at this point. I haven't heard back yet, but I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. But I just wanted to take a minute and remind you guys, like, no matter who the person is, you know, try and be kind, because when we lose our pets, when we lose our fish, when we lose our anything, it's difficult. And you know, I absolutely dread the idea of losing my Oscar. I love him. He's a mascot. He's a wet pet. Big fish have big personalities, and he's just, you know, he's been around, he's been with me for the bulk of my adult fish keeping career. And the fish room's not going to be the same when he passes. But you know, it's gonna happen. I don't know if it's gonna be weeks, if it's gonna be months, if it's gonna be years. The way he's behaving is very, very similar to his pouting behavior. He's hanging out at the top of the tank a lot. He's not swimming vertically unless he's eating. His appetite is great. His body condition's good. He orients himself fine when I feed him, but the rest of the time he's just kind of on his side at the top of the tank, which is not really that uncommon for Oscars, but it's not typical of Captain. So we'll have to see. But anyway, I just wanted to remind you guys, you know, that this keeping living things is not always a guarantee. Even if we do our best, sometimes things go wrong. Even if we do our best, sometimes, you know, animals die, and it's kind of the sad and brutal part of fish keeping. And I'm sure that there's people out there that would say, then don't do it, or you shouldn't do it. But I like to think, like, for instance, in the case of Captain, I mean, he's had 12 really fantastic years with me. He's been a healthy, vital, active, beautiful, exciting fish to keep. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how this goes. So I'm going to get back to work. I need to get packed up. I have a lot of plants to pull for my demo. I have to go through my aquascaping equipment. I have to go through my camera equipment. Need to get my water changes done and feed the fish room. But I just want to let you guys know sort of what was going on and just open up a dialogue with you about, you know, being compassionate and being understanding, especially, you know, to people who are in the public eye. I mean, we're only human, and sometimes stuff happens, and everything's gonna die sometime. So anyway, I hope you guys all have a wonderful weekend. If I can, I will continue to put out content this weekend, but I'm not really sure how much time I will have at the event, nor if I'll be able to get decent footage. As always, I appreciate your guys' thoughts. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about sort of the judgment that goes along with being in the fish keeping community. As always, I appreciate the continued support.